Hi everyone. Thanks Jiaxin for the kind introduction. So welcome to my talk on revisiting quantum CCA secure public key encryption. Hi, I'm Varun. I'm a fresh postdoc at Sandbox AQ. And this talk will be based on joint work with Naveed Alamati, who's at Visa Research. And this work was done while I was a PhD student at AT Zurich. Now, I will start this talk by first deconstructing the title. So, starting with CCA Secure Public Key Encryption. So, here's a quick one-slide recap of what we mean by the security definition. So, in CC security guarantees that when Alice encrypts a message under Bob's public key, then third parties such as Eve should not be able to figure out what is Alice's message just from the ciphertext alone. And this should hold even if Eve has like a black box access to Bob's decryption oracle. Great. Now, what do we mean by quantum CC secure public key encryption? So if you go back to the earlier definition, so note that Eve only has classical access to the decryption oracle. So Eve can only query classical ciphertexts and get back classical decryption. Now, in the so-called in quantum CCA security, or QCCA security for short, as introduced by Bonnie and Zandri, in such a notion, Eve now has quantum access to the decryption oracle. So now Eve can query ciphertexts in superposition and get back the decryptions in superposition as well. Now, this notion is relevant when, in the future, when Bob starts using like a quantum device or any device which can handle quantum data, then this notion captures the fact that, adversaries can also get some kind of a quantum access to such devices. But it also turns out that this notion is relevant also in some not so far future scenarios. For example, there are cases when an adversary can somehow trick a classical device. For example, like some smart card used by Bob. It can trick the classical device to behave quantumly. For example, by keeping it in a keeping very super low temperatures or just shielding the device from electromagnetic interference, etc. So apparently there are some physical experiments, but yeah, I don't know much about them. But yeah, so now what do we mean by revisiting quantum CCA secure public key encryption? So if we go back to the plain CCA secure public key encryption in a post-quantum setting, then there are numerous instantiations of such a scheme in the literature. So we have instantiations from lattices, from error correcting codes, from isogeny-based group actions, etc. But when we come to the quantum CCA security setting, then turns out that there's only one such instantiation from lattices. That's the only instantiation we know of in the standard model by Bonnie and Zandri. So I stress standard model because if we allow quantum random output model setting, then there exists a rich set of generic constructions of QCCA secure public key encryption. For example, using variants of Fujisaki Okamoto transformations, etc. So in the rest of my talk and in this project, we only focused on the standard model. So the natural question is, can we also construct such a scheme from other objects such as codes and group actions? So on a very high level, so this was one of NIST's main motivation to standardize additional signatures, which are not only based on structured lattices. And also in light of the recent claimed attack on LWE, I think it's better if we also focus our attention on other different instantiations of cryptographic schemes from objects other than lattices. Okay, so now if we go back to Bonnie and Zandri's construction of a QCCA secure public key encryption from lattices. So again, on a high level, they follow the blueprint of a prior LWE-based construction of a CCA secure public key encryption by Agrawal et al. So Agrawal et al, they construct their CCA secure public key encryption by first constructing a so-called, okay, I'm sorry about this formatting, but they first construct a so-called selectively secure IBE scheme, identity-based encryption. And then there exists a generic transform in the literature by Bonnet et al. In early 2000s, where they show you can transform your IBE to a CC secure public key encryption. And so Boney and Zandri, they do the same. They do something similar. So first, they construct a new primitive. They call it quantum secure IBE scheme. So where on a high level, the security notion looks like something like the adversary can now corrupt users in a quantum fashion. That is, the adversary can query for secret keys in superposition. And then Boney and Zandri then they showed that the same VCHK transform below the IBE to PK transform, it also works in the quantum setting. So you can obtain a QCC secure PK scheme from a Q-selective IBE. So by the way, I'll be throwing all these different primitives at you, like selective IBE, Q-selective IBE. So just be fair warning, just be prepared. So now if we focus on this VCHK transform from IBE to PKE, so in the classical setting, it's not the only generic construction we know of. So there are so many other generic constructions of a CC PK scheme from different objects. For example, from KDM secure public key encryption, or like key dependent message secure, from hash proof systems, from adaptive type functions, etc. So that's why we considered, so can we show similar generic constructions for QCC secure public key encryption? Now, Boney and Zandri, they addressed the IBE part, but however, they had to rely on a more stronger and non-standard security assumption for their starting IBE scheme. Namely, that they need the IBE to be secure against this adversary which has quantum access to some secret key oracles. So therefore, so in that sense, the result doesn't look surprising, right? If you already start with an adversary who has quantum access, then you can also prove security for an adversary which has quantum access to the decryption oracles. So this brings me to our first contribution. So in our work, we show how to generically construct such a primitive, quantum secure primitive from these objects on the right, like from hash proof systems and from KDM secure public key encryption. And one nice part is that we don't make any extra assumptions. So we are not touching the security notions at all. So we don't give any special quantum access to the adversaries. Of course, we require the starting security properties to hold against a QPT adversary, but that's the only thing we assume. And now, if we now talk about concrete instantiations from different assumptions, then as I mentioned before, so Boney and Zandri, they use an LWE-based assumption to construct their IBE scheme. Coming to these constructions on the right, there already exists generic instantiations of these objects, some from error correcting codes and from group actions in the literature. So if you plug in these instantiations, then if you also mix in our results, then this implies new instantiations of QCC secure public key encryption from other objects other than lattices. Now, all this time, there was still this question mark that I didn't address. So we also show adaptive PDFs can give you QCC secure public key encryption. However, we also had to assume some extra property as was done by Boney and Zandri. So we assume that the adaptive PDF also holds when an adversary has quantum access to the TDF inversion oracle. I won't go into details of the security notion. However, we also then go on to show that such a primitive is implied by another existing primitive in the literature called correlated product TDFs. Again, it's not a new primitive we are introducing; it's already there in the literature. And again, one nice thing is you don't need to assume anything extra property of that building block. So you only assume that the security holds for post-quantum QPT adversaries, but that's it. You're not touching the security properties and security notions at all. So then also Jiaxin and Pan, they showed how to instantiate this primitive from lattices. So this means that our work also gives a new instantiation of QCC secure public key encryption from lattices. But we hope that this primitive that you introduced, this quantum adaptive PDF, hopefully people can find more applications of such a primitive beyond constructing QCC secure public key encryption. So this is somehow like the bird-eyes view of our result on a very high level, but we are not done yet. So if you forget about the assumptions for a brief moment, and if you only focus on the generic part, so during our analysis, we also came up with some interesting connections, interesting results. So focusing on our KDM-based result, so technically we show that such a KDM secure public encryption gives us QCC secure KEM, key encapsulation mechanism. And then we also showed that such a KEM also gives us QCC secret public key encryption via the standard hybrid KEM paradigm. But one interesting thing here is that we don't require any strong DEM in the composition. So we only require the DEM to be secure against a post-quantum adversary who only has classical access to the encryption and decryption oracles. Now coming to our TDF-based result, we show that such a TDF gives us a QCC secret public key encryption, which can only encrypt single bit, like 0 or 1. And then we show that a single bit QCC secret public key encryption can be bootstrapped to give us multi-bit QCC secret public key encryption. So in essence, what we did was we extended so-called completeness of bit encryption in the classical CCA setting as shown by Hohenberger et al. We extended their analysis to the quantum QCC setting. So this is more fine-grained view of our results. So how much time do I have? I'm just curious because. Okay, cool. Okay, so then if you can go back to the starting notion that we started my talk with, like QCC secret public key encryption, if we again go back to the definition, so one subtle thing about this definition is that, again, I won't go into the syntax or whatever, but it's basically like a left or right kind of notion. So Eve picks like a left message or right message, and they're supposed to like distinguish which one is which. However, so this challenge phase, this left or right phase, it's a classical phase. So Eve only picks left, classical message left and classical message on the right. However, the other phases, like before the challenge phase and after the challenge phase, when Eve has quantum access to the decryption oracle, so in some sense, people thought, all my phases are quantum phases, but why are we restricting ourselves in the classical phase in the challenge setting? So people thought, this inconsistency across phases was a bit artificial. That's why in the community, people suggested more realistic quantum security notions. So one such notion that was introduced 2 years ago by Chevalier et al. Was this so-called Q in QCCA security notion, where again, I won't go into the details, but essentially now all phases are somehow quantum. And this is more like a real or random style definition, not a left or right definition. But one nice thing that Chevalier et al. Showed was that we can pick any QCC secret public key encryption, and we can generically construct this truly quantum Q in QCC secret public key encryption. So that means that if you plug in the lifting theorem in our generic results, then that means that now we can also construct this truly quantum secure primitive from all these objects, all these generic objects. And furthermore, if you also plug in this existing instantiation from different objects, then this means that now we have new instantiations of such a Q in QCC secure public key encryption from different objects as well. Yeah, so this truly is like an overview of our results. But one thing that I really want to stress in this talk is that even though we are talking about some new quantum security notions, but all of our PK constructions that we analyzed, they're all classical constructions. By that, I mean that all these PK schemes, they can be implemented on classical devices. So you can just use your favorite programming language to just implement them, even though they're probably not very practical. So the motivation with the previous thing was that, eventually when quantum computing becomes realistic or mainstream, and when these PK schemes are ported to a quantum device, then our QCC security analysis gives us some confidentiality guarantees that once you implement them on a quantum computer, then we can still expect some kind of confidentiality even when adversaries have quantum access to the device. These constructions that we analyzed, they're in contrast to some quantum PK schemes introduced in the literature, so where they inherently require some kind of a quantum machinery. So for example, some quantum PK schemes introduced by Baruti et al., they inherently require quantum public keys, which cannot be implemented with the technology we have currently. All right, so now in the final part of my talk, I will go over and I'll give an overview of the techniques we used behind our QCC security analysis. Here I'll take the example of our KDM-based result. So first, let's focus on how analysis is done in the classical CCA security setting. So Kitagawa et al. They showed how to construct a CC secret public encryption from KDM PKE. And the way analysis proceeds in cryptography mostly is via a reduction. So we first assume that there exists an adversary who breaks the CC security of the constructed PKC. Then we can use this adversary to KDM security. And more formally, the way proof proceeds is via a sequence of game hybrids usually. So you start with an instantiate security game where Eve has access to the decryption oracle. And then in a certain game, you replace this decryption oracle with a new decryption oracle, which does not use the secret key to respond to Eve's queries. And you do that so that in the final game step, our KDM adversary can simulate this decryption oracle. And then it can simulate this decryption oracle towards E, and then you use that interaction to break KDM security in the end. That's why you require the decryption oracle deck to not use any secret keys, because typically the KDM adversary there does not get this secret information to respond to the decryption queries of E. So now essentially what we did in our paper was to extend such classical CCA security reduction strategies to the quantum CCA setting. So typically the sequence of game hybrids, the strategy remains roughly the same. But then of course the problem is, in each such game hybrid, typically the adversary now has quantum access to the decryption oracles. And this brings about its own set of challenges. So for example, when I said you replace the original decryption oracle with a modified decryption oracle, now, how can you argue about indistinguishability when the adversary has quantum access? So to argue about indistinguishability, we use the so-called generalized one-way two-heading lemma of Baines et al. So this lemma is a popular proof technique in the QROM, and use that in a new setting. So just to give a brief history of the lemma, so the original one-way two-heading lemma was introduced by Unruh, and it was mainly used to argue, certain random oracles are indistinguishable in a quantum setting. So the random oracles which model hash functions. And in such oracles, they have uniform output distribution. But, oh my God, forget this one. So later on, the lemma was generalized to oracles which have arbitrary output distribution or not necessarily a uniform distribution. But again, to the best of our knowledge, even though the lemma was generalized, subsequent work still restricted the lemma in the QROM setting. So one technical contribution of our work is to find a new application for the generalized lemma in a new setting, especially in the standard model, and not the QROM where it is typically used. And the application being that we use the lemma to establish QCC security of standard model PKE schemes. And the one-way two-hiding lemma in our application, so we use that with respect to quantum oracles which implement advanced functionalities such as decryption and not simple hash-based oracles. All right, but this doesn't mean that you just take classical CCA security proof, and in such steps, whenever you come across a game hybrid where you're replacing the decryption oracle, you just use this lemma as it is and you're done. So it's not that simple. So for example, in our result, when we showed this completeness of bit encryption in the quantum QCC setting, we had to use the one-way two-heading lemma in a nested fashion. That we had to use the lemma in on two levels, on a high level, and it had to be done in a careful manner. And we also had to introduce then additional game hybrids for this. So when I was writing this slide, I was about to say, more details can be found on our paper, but I realized that we didn't upload our paper yet on ePrint, but it'll be uploaded shortly. Okay, so to conclude my talk, so as I said, the CC secret public encryption in a post-quantum setting, it's a very well-studied primitive. So there are tons of instantiations of such a scheme from different generic objects, from different assumptions. So we try to do something similar, but for the quantum CC secure primitive. So these are the instantiations we obtain. So I will end this talk by proposing an open question. So as you can see, So all the objects on the left, like for example, hash proof systems or KDM secret public key encryption or correlated product PDFs and so on, all these primitives which imply CC secret public key encryption also seem to imply QCC secret public key encryption because of the results. So one might say, are these primitives, are they equivalent on a fundamental level? So can someone generically obtain QCC secret public key encryption starting with a CC secret public key encryption? Or can someone show like a separation, a fundamental separation between these two objects? So maybe that would explain why Boneh and Zandri had to rely on a quantum selective IDE scheme and not on a simple selective IDE scheme, which gives you CC secret public key encryption. So either showing an implication or a separation, I think it would be a very cool reason. With this, I end my talk. Thanks for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the audience?
The need of CCA because the size of this word is or
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, okay, if I go into more details, so the way it works in QCC setting is that so in the starting phase, so you can query the decryption oracle on superposition, like you have quantum access, and then in the challenge phase, you can only pick classical messages left or right, and then in the after challenge phase, so your new decryption oracle. Whenever you query the challenge ciphertext as part of your superposition, for that you get like an error symbol in your superposition that you get back, and in the other stuff you just get back normal decryption. So that's the reason why if you now have like a quantum challenge phase, then the thing that you asked becomes so then your challenge ciphertext is also superposition, and then how can you how can you record basically? So that's why the people had to come up with some not an left or right kind of notion, but this Q in QCC, as I said, it's a real or random style notion where you either interact with a real encryption and decryption oracles or you react with a random oracle there. But still, they had to use some complex frameworks for this recording thing that you said.
but like you could ask the superposition of all ciphertexts and then get some decryptions and that's allowed in the DB.
Yes, that's allowed, yeah. But the thing with quantumness is that, as Scott Aronson says, it's not that you can do stuff in parallel, right? So even if you can ask, what useful information do you get back? Yeah.
So I think we are a little bit short on time, but yeah, probably you can
Offline, yeah.
offline.
Yeah.
Thanks, speaker again. Second talk, which is multi-hop fine-grained proxy encryptions. So the authors are Yun Xiao Zhou, Shen Yu, Shuai Han. So Yun Xiao will present them. Okay. Oh. So try into that. Okay, so yes. Control L.
Thanks for the nice introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Zhou. I'm gonna give a talk about the paper multi-hop fine-grained proxy re-encryption. This is a joint work with Sheng Liu and Shuan Han. So we start from the normal proxy re-encryption. PRE, or short for PRE. PRE is an extension of public key encryption. When Alice receives a ciphertext under her PK, she can forward this ciphertext to her proxy Polly, who has a special re-encryption key, or re-key for short. With this re-key, his proxy Polly can transform her ciphertext to another ciphertext of Bob. And the latter ciphertext can be decrypted by Bob himself and obtain the same message that Alice receives. So, fine-grained proxy re-encryption was first proposed by Jiaxin, which supports more flexible delegation. And now we know that the re-key is additionally associated with the function. And the proxy can perform fine-grained re-encryption. The fine-grained means that Bob can only recover a function of the message M instead of the whole message that Alice receives. So FPRE has two types, single hop PRE and multi-hop. In a single hop FPRE, the ciphertext can be re-encrypted only once. And in multi-hop FPRE, the ciphertext can be re-encrypted for multiple times. That is the Alice ciphertext can be first transformed to Bob's and then to Charlie's. Hello? Okay, sorry. Okay, in a practical scenario, the single hop LPRE supports only single level delegation, while the multi-hop LPRE can support multi-level delegations. So the multi-hop one is more convenient in practical scenario. Next, we give a brief introduction to the secret model, the CPA security of the MFPRE. So we first consider multi-user settings, and during the game, the adversary can corrupt some users and open their single key. We call these users corrupted users, and the other are honest user. At the challenge phase, the adversary chooses a challenge user and send the message 0 and message 1 to 8, and receives a challenge ciphertext. The adversary is asked to tell which message the challenge ciphertext encrypts. In addition, the adversary can obtain recays that does not lead to the trivial attack. For example, it can obtain recays from the challenge user to the honest user, or honest user to the challenge user, and the corrupted user to both challenge and honest user. But it is not allowed to get a recay from challenge user to the corrupted user, because with this recay, the adversary can easily transform the challenge ciphertext, decrypt it, and obtain the message, trivially win the game. HR security is a stronger model than CPA security. HRA means that honest re-encryption attack. This model was first proposed in Cohort 19. In addition to the recays that the adversary is allowed to obtain in CPA model, the adversary is also allowed to get some honest re-encryption queries. This is some re-encryption query from the honest user, including the challenge user to the corrupted users. So the HR security is strictly stronger than CPA security. Okay, for our contribution, we first present the formal definitions for multi-hop FPRE and its securities. Besides, we present a generic framework for achieving CPA and HR security for multi-hop FPRE. Finally, we give a construction. We give the first construction of multi-hop FPRE from LWE with adaptive HR security. Okay, next I'll give you an overview of our techniques of constructing MFPRE. We first recap that the scheme in ZSD23, the scheme of them has two levels of ciphertext. The first level ciphertext can be re-encrypted, but the second level ciphertext cannot, and thus they only achieve single hop FPRE. Moreover, in their scheme, the public key of each user is consist of two parts corresponding to the ciphertext. The second public key of each user contains a random part that picked by a trusted party. This is very necessary to their proof, to the proof of their adaptive security. So their scheme cannot easily be extended to a multi-hop one. We can observe that multi-hop FPRE implicitly requires that the ciphertext of all levels should be similar. We see a level is that a fresh ciphertext has been re-encrypted once, then it's level 1, has been re-encrypted twice, then it's in level 2. So since the one ciphertext can be re-encrypted multiple times, so so all the ciphertexts should be similar. In our multi-hop FPRE scheme, each user only has one pair of public and secret key, and the trusted party is not needed anymore. However, the one-level ciphertext brings some troubles in proving adaptive security because we suppose that during the game, the adversary correlates the key from Alice to Bob, and Alice is the change user, so we need to simulate the key because we don't have the trapdoor of the change user. So to simulate the key, we will embed LW problem on the public key of Bob. And this causes that the trapdoor of Bob is also unknown to us. So for an adaptive adversary, it might then correlate key from Bob to Charlie, and we need to use the trapdoor of Bob to generate the key for it. But since we don't have the trapdoor, so it's hard to reply. This is a problem in proving adaptive security. So to solve this, we first consider the first step of us is to consider the selective security. In a selective model, this question can be solved by simulate the key from the bottom to the top. So we can say, for example, we first replace key from B to C, and now since this key is fixed one, so it does not need Bob's trapdoor. So then the next step, we replace key from A to B. Note that after the first step, the trapdoor of B is not needed and just a step is okay. So this problem is solved, but this is selective security. So to reach selective security to adaptive security, we use some techniques and framework. JKPW17 introduces a framework that raises selective security to adaptive security when the security reduction is like a pebbling game. And FKP19 first introduced this technique to standard PRE, normal PRE, not fine-grained PRE, and deeply discussed the adaptive security of PRE. For us, we extend this technique, this framework and the technique to multi-hop FPRE settings. And thus we can achieve adaptive security. Okay. Next, we will show the CPA security of our scheme. The CPA security is implied by two secret notions, IND security and WKP security. We first introduced these two notions. The IND security considers the semantic security of the underlying PKE scheme. So when consider IND security, we will ignore the re-key and the re-encryption queries. So we just consider the Chinese ciphertext, the indistinguishability of the Chinese ciphertext. This is IND security. And for weakly key privacy, WKP security considers the indistinguishability of the re-key pairs without providing any secret keys of associated users. That is, if both user A and user B are honest users, we can replace the re-key between them by simulate ones, by fake ones, without trapdoor. Okay, for our scheme, the IND security, the basic PKE scheme of our construction is dual-regular encryption. So the IND security is very directly from the RW assumption. And for WKP security, the key part of the array encryption key of our scheme is a matrix R sampled by pre-image sampling algorithm, such that the below equation holds. Under the LW assumption, we can say the right side of the equation is close to random, and consequently, the pre-image R is a random is also close to random. So our scheme also achieves WKP security, and as a result, the CPA security is proved. Next is HR security. We want to raise CPA security to HR security. It will need a new security notion named source hiding SH security. The SH security considers that the adversary cannot distinguish ciphertext that with proxy relation and ciphertext that generated indefinitely. So even the adversary obtains the rate K from user I and user G. So this is a statistical security. Okay, for our construction, to achieve SH security, we set noise bound of different size for different levels of ciphertext. Concretely, the noise and the Q grows sub-exponentially with the ciphertext levels. Okay, after the transformation of public key, we use a fresh ciphertext of 0 at next level to smooth the noise of the ciphertext. Enabling the re-encrypted ciphertext is statistically close to a fresh ciphertext at the next level, and thus we achieve the SH security. There is also another advanced property, serial security. This security was first proposed in JRC3, and they defined this property for single hop IPRE. So we extend this property to multi-hop IPRE. So this property is expected to protect the underlying proxy relationship, and we hope that the ciphertext chain with proxy relations is indistinguishable from the ciphertext that generated indefinitely. This is similar to the SH security, but there are minor differences. Okay, in our paper, we formalize all about security properties and in multi-hop IPRE settings, and establish relations among them by reduction. The final part is comparison of our scheme and now existing multi-hop PREs. So as we can see in the table, our scheme achieves adaptive HRA security in the standard model, and all about security notions I have mentioned, and we are the first scheme that support fine-grained multi-hop fine-grained re-encryption. Okay, this is the end of the talk. Thanks for your attention. Any question?
So I have a question. So you only consider CPA security, right? So what would be the next step? Were you going to consider the CCA security?
Yeah, I will consider CCA security, but the CCA security there is some problem. It's hard to achieve because normally we achieve a CCA PKE scheme. We will use signatures or to verify that the ciphertext is right one. But however, in proxy re-encryption, we note that there is a transform of the public key. So we also need to transform the signature or MAC to verify the ciphertext. This is not very easy to do, so but we will consider that.
Thanks. Let's thank the speaker again. This talk will be on the possibility of a backdoor in the Mikali-Schnorr generator. So this is a joint work with Hannah Davis, Matthew Green, Nadia Hennigan, Keegan Bryant, Adam and Shu. So I think Ketan is going to give the talk.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. This talk will be a little bit different. The goal of this talk is to tell you a cryptographic mystery that has been puzzling cryptographers for about the last decade. And in this talk, we're not going to fully resolve this mystery, but our goal is to share with you the progress that we've made in answering this question and convince you that this is a mystery worth solving. So the story begins with a random number generator that you may be familiar with, DualEC DRBG. DualEC was first proposed for standardization at a 2004 presentation at a NIST workshop. I apologize for the confusing diagram here. It's taken directly from the slides. The important thing is that DualEC is based on asymmetric cryptography, specifically elliptic curves. DualEC was ultimately standardized in NIST special publication 800-90A, and as part of the standard, it included multiple pairs of pre-generated elliptic curve points, P and Q. Now, throughout the standardization process, DualEC was the subject of multiple attempts at cryptanalysis. Multiple groups independently came to the conclusion that it would be possible to backdoor DualEC. More specifically, if an adversary knows the discrete log of those elliptic curve points P and Q, they can observe some of the output of DualEC, recover the secret internal state, and then use the secret state to predict the future output. Now, despite these shortcomings in DualEC, it remained in the standard, and multiple companies began implementing DualEC. One of these companies was Juniper Networks. In 2012, Juniper Networks was hacked, and their values of P and Q were replaced with values under the control of the attacker. And later analysis would show that knowledge of these custom-created elliptic curve points P and Q would allow the attacker to passively decrypt the VPN traffic that was going through these Juniper Networks devices. And we say this as a way of motivating that even the possibility of a backdoor in an encryption system, in a crypto system, is potentially problematic and can have catastrophic consequences. This issue in Juniper Networks is ultimately patched 3 years later in 2015. And although we're skipping over quite a few parts about the history of DualEC, the point remains that even the potential for a backdoor can be catastrophic. But why are we talking about DualEC anyway? This talk is about Macaulay-Schnorr. So Macaulay-Schnorr was first proposed for standardization in a 2004 presentation at a NIST workshop. I apologize for the confusing diagram. This was taken directly from those 2004 slides. The important thing is that Macaulay-Schnorr is based on asymmetric cryptography, specifically RSA. Macaulay-Schnorr was standardized in ISO 18031, and as part of the standard, it includes multiple sets of pre-generated RSA moduli. Now think about that. Why would a standard need to include a pre-generated RSA modulus? And what happens if you know the factorization? Now, the similarities between DualEC and Macaulay-Schnorr seem to run out here. But on the other hand, there were some subtle changes between the version of Macaulay-Schnorr that was initially proposed for standardization and the version of Macaulay-Schnorr that was ultimately accepted. For example, the amount of bits of output per iteration increased dramatically between these two revisions. And because the proof of security for Macaulay-Schnorr depends on the bits of output, it depends exponentially on these bits, then this change in Macaulay-Schnorr, the standardized version, seems to invalidate the proof of security. So what is going on with Macaulay-Schnorr? Well, Macaulay-Schnorr is pretty simple to describe. The secret internal state of Macaulay-Schnorr is a large integer s. And to increment the state, we take s and we raise it to the power of e modulo n, where e and n are those hard-coded default parameters in the standard. So we're performing a textbook RSA encryption on this state. We take the k least bits of the state and we output those as the RNG output. And we take the remaining bits of the state and that becomes the new value of s. This gives us a very nice algebraic relationship between the previous state, the new state, the output, and those hard-coded parameters. If we need more than k bits of output, we can repeat this process over and over. This may remind you of the Blum-Shub algorithm, but in the case of Blum-Shub, where there's only one or a few bits of output for every cycle RNG, in Macaulay-Schnorr, there can be thousands. So maybe we can use all of these thousands of bits of output to somehow figure out what that secret state is. Unfortunately, it seems a little bit challenging to do this because we're doing this truncation of the state and only keeping the most bits of that RSA encryption. We only ever have a partial RSA ciphertext. So we don't have a way of performing this RSA decryption with only a partial ciphertext. So it's unclear how we'd be able to use the ability to do RSA decryption to move backwards through these states. So this leads us to the main question that we're trying to investigate. Does knowledge of the factorization of these hard-coded moduli in the standard lead to some sort of attack on Macaulay-Schnorr? Or to make it a little bit more general, maybe you don't know the factorization of these moduli, but we allow for any sort of malicious construction of these RSA moduli. Is there some way to attack the properties of this random number generator? And although, once again, we don't have a full answer for this question and a full resolution towards this mystery, we do have a number of interesting observations that we've been able to make. The first observation is that there's no simple backdoor in Macaulay-Schnorr. And by this, if we take the construction of Macaulay-Schnorr and we replace that RSA encryption operation with a random invertible function, more specifically, an efficiently computable pseudorandom permutation, then we can see that this sort of resembles a cryptographic sponge in duplex mode. And we can use these results to show that this modified version of Macaulay-Schnorr with a random function is provably secure. So that means if that the original standardized version of Macaulay-Schnorr is not secure, it's because that process of RSA encryption is not a random invertible function. And we already know it to be the case that it's not a random invertible function. It is invertible because the inverse of RSA encryption is RSA decryption, but it's not random because there's this extra algebraic structure that we get from doing the RSA encryption. So this result tells us that if there is a backdoor in Macaulay-Schnorr, it somehow needs to use this extra algebraic information of the RSA encryption function. We can't just use RSA decryption as a black box. So this points us towards doing algebraic cryptanalysis in order to be able to analyze Macaulay-Schnorr. This leads us to our second observation. There does exist an algebraic attack on Macaulay-Schnorr, but for non-default choices of the parameters. Now, because we're doing algebraic cryptanalysis, we can look at the algebraic structure of that Macaulay-Schnorr state equation, where we have the relationship between the previous state, the current state, the output, and the hard-coded parameters. And if we look at this equation, we know that because we have this truncation, those states S are small, the value of B is known, and the hard-coded exponent in the standard is 3. So we have a small degree modular polynomial with a small solution. And those of you familiar with algebraic cryptanalysis may think this is a perfect way and the perfect opportunity to apply Coppersmith's method. Unfortunately, Coppersmith's method fails in this case. The specific parameter sizes chosen in ISO 18031 rule out Coppersmith's attack and prevent it from succeeding for these parameters. But this is only one algebraic equation that we can use to set up and relate the states of Macaulay-Schnorr. What if instead of using the algebraic equation based on RSA encryption, we use the relation based on RSA decryption? So this is where it becomes a little bit less standard. So if we consider RSA public exponent where instead of being equal to 3, we choose a public exponent where the corresponding decryption exponent is small, then we can rewrite the algebraic equation in this form. And once again, we have the small values of the state S, we have a small degree D, and we have a modular polynomial. So in this case, when we apply Coppersmith's method, it does succeed. Now, you may think it's a little bit unusual. Why would it be possible to have an instance of Macaulay-Schnorr where we use the default hard-coded RSA public modulus, but use a non-default suspicious-looking public exponent? But this isn't just allowed by the Macaulay-Schnorr standard. It is explicitly recommended by the standard that this should be possible. So it still seems a little bit contrived that an adversary would be able to inject their own specific value of E into this RNG and be able to observe the output. So this attack isn't perfect, and there are some shortcomings, but it does work against a fully compliant implementation of ISO 18031. So that's another result. A third result that we have is that we have attacks on modified versions of Macaulay-Schnorr. So we can look at a simplified version of Macaulay-Schnorr called RSA-PRG. And RSA-PRG was proposed in the same paper by Macaulay and Schnorr that initially proposed what eventually became standardized as a Macaulay-Schnorr algorithm. So similar to Macaulay-Schnorr, the RSA-PRG has a large state S, and to increment, you apply RSA textbook encryption, you raise it to the power of E modulo N, and you output the K least significant bits. But unlike in the case of Macaulay-Schnorr, there is no truncation in RSA-PRG. So you take the whole value of the RSA ciphertext, you encrypt it again, output the K least significant bits, raise it to the power of E modulo N, K least significant bits out over and over. So this gives us a very nice relationship between subsequent states. The ith state is the 0th state raised to the power of E to the power of I. And we get this because we're raising to the power of E I times. So we have this very nice relationship in the RSA-PRG that we didn't have in the Macaulay-Schnorr PRG. So let's walk through an example. So here we have an RSA modulus and an RSA public exponent. And if you doubt that this is a legitimate, fairly generated RSA public modulus, you can always check to see if it's prime. You'll find that it's composite. And because it's composite, you know that it was fairly generated, right? Well, maybe not, but I don't know what else you can do. So we have the state, we can increment it. Everything looks fine so far. We get to output 18. Everything looks fine. This seems like a valid instantiation of the RSA-PRG. But we cycle one more time, and we see that the 16th state is exactly equal to the 19th state. So how is this possible? An RNG should not have a cycle that is this short. Well, we can ask the question of how long should the cycles be in the RSA-PRG. Because we're working with an exponent inside of an exponent, we have this relationship where the ith state is the 0th state to the E to the I. We have this exponent inside of an exponent. So the cycle should depend on phi of n, because the cycles in the exponent will be phi of n, and within the exponent in the exponent, it'll be phi of n. And it turns out that it's easy to generate parameters where the cycle length is a divisor of phi of n. So in the example I showed before, that's how we had a cycle of length 3, is because 3 was a divisor of phi of n that was maliciously constructed. So this gives us a way of creating a vulnerable output where we have the output repeating with a short cycle. But even though this is efficiently exploitable by the attacker, it's also easily detectable by the person using the RNG. They will be able to see that the output repeats. So we would like to modify this in some way to hide this behavior and make it possible to attack this, but not possible to detect it. This leads us to our next observation, where there is a modification where we can get this attack to work on the RSA-PRG without it being detected by the user. So recall in these cycles, we have this relationship within the exponent, where the value of E to the I is equal to E to the J mod phi of n. And this leads to an equivalence in the states, where state I equals state J. This gives us a cycle, but because the state repeats exactly, this becomes obvious. So maybe instead of having this obvious relationship in the exponents, we have a more subtle, indirect relationship in the exponent. And we have this polynomial that describes how these are connected. This still gives us a relationship between the states, but now that relationship is a little bit harder to find and a little bit more subtle. This is still exploitable. The adversary can use multivariate Coppersmith method to recover these small values of the state, but it's a little bit harder for the user to find. So to complete this, the adversary is able to choose this relation in the exponent, build the RSA public modulus in a way that encodes the secret relationship, and then observe the subsequent states from the RNG, use this secret knowledge of the relationship to predict the state and recover the future outputs. And we conjecture that if the choice of this relationship in the exponents is chosen with high enough entropy, that this is hard for the user to find. So it would be a sort of undetectable backdoor in RSA-PRG. So once again, this is only for the RSA-PRG, and it's that modified form of the Macaulay-Schnorr algorithm. So can we extend this to work with Macaulay-Schnorr? Unfortunately, this seems like it's hard. The RSA PRG has this very nice closed form that relates these subsequent states, but Macaulay-Schnorr doesn't. You can still construct a polynomial that relates these subsequent states, but because it depends on the output, this Macaulay-Schnorr relationship ends up having an exponential number of terms, and the polynomial itself depends on the output. So it's hard to conceive of a world where the entity trying to backdoor Macaulay-Schnorr is able to conceive of all these polynomials at the same time. So this possible backdoor in RSA PRG doesn't seem to directly extend to Macaulay-Schnorr, and more work is needed. All right, so just to recap what results we have so far, we found that Macaulay-Schnorr has no simple backdoors. So we've provably shown that if that update function is a random invertible function, then Macaulay-Schnorr is provably secure, which means that if it's insecure, we have to do some sort of algebraic cryptanalysis. We've also seen that the Macaulay-Schnorr standard, the ISO 18031, allows for the use of insecure parameters, but it's not by default. And finally, we've shown that a simplification of Macaulay-Schnorr called the RSA PRG can be backdoored, but we're unable to get this to extend to Macaulay-Schnorr. So this leads us to a question for you, the audience. Have you seen Macaulay-Schnorr being used in the real world? Have you seen this implemented anywhere? Because people didn't think that dual EC was implemented anywhere for many years until the case of Juniper and the hack was announced. People began digging into Juniper, saw how they were using these constants, and eventually realized that this subversion, this replacement of these constants allowed for passive decryption of Juniper devices. So maybe Macaulay-Schnorr has been implemented, maybe it is currently being used, and maybe that will provide some hints of whether or not it could be backdoored or could be exploited. So if you have any idea of where Macaulay-Schnorr might be used, we'd be happy to hear from you. So just to sum up, we have all these different results from Macaulay-Schnorr, but we haven't answered the main central mystery. Is it possible to backdoor Macaulay-Schnorr? Is it possible to generate these malicious public parameters in a way that subverts the security of Macaulay-Schnorr? And it's a little bit unusual because Macaulay-Schnorr has been around for many years. RSA has been around for even longer, but we're unable to either prove the security of Macaulay-Schnorr based on standard RSA assumptions, but we're also unable to come up with an attack on Macaulay-Schnorr. So why is this? Why can't we do one or the other? There has to be some sort of resolution for whether or not it is possible to create an efficient backdoor, but so far we haven't been able to do so. So the problem of finding a backdoor Macaulay-Schnorr is more complex than it seems at first. And hopefully we've motivated that it is a mystery that's worth solving. So is there a backdoor in Macaulay-Schnorr? If there is, what is it? The answers are out there. And even though this problem has been, researchers have been thinking about this problem for almost a decade, there's been no convincing resolution so far. So maybe you have the answer. Maybe you can find the backdoor in Macaulay-Schnorr. The question is still open and the answers are still out there. Our full paper is on ePrint. We have the full details of our attacks and some additional attacks. We recommend that you go and check out this paper. With that, I'm happy to take any questions and thank you for listening.
Any questions?
So a practical countermeasures for this attack. I think if there were any countermeasures, the best countermeasures that you could do would be mixing in multiple modes of RNGs. So what you could do is you could take RNG output from multiple sources, XOR together. That would give you greater confidence that at least one of them would be correct. And if at least one of them does have the random properties that you're looking for, then the process of XORing them together would give you security. More generally, I guess for standards, it would be useful to have constructions that are well understood and founded on well-studied hardness assumptions, rather than the case of Macaulay-Schnorr, where it seems like the hardness assumptions underlying Macaulay-Schnorr aren't as well studied. So there's sort of the defenses from a standardization point of view and the defenses from an implementation point of view.
I'm wondering if small private exponent.
The use case for a small private exponent, it seems limited to the attack that we've described here. So it seems like a implementation of Macaulay-Schnorr. I can't personally think of a justification for why you might legitimately want to have a small private exponent, because there is no use of RSA decryption in the standardized form of Macaulay-Schnorr. That also leads to another weakness in that proposed attack of using Macaulay-Schnorr with a small private exponent, because we know that there are attacks that recover the RSA private key when there is a small private exponent. So if you're given some mysterious large RSA public exponent where the corresponding private exponent is small, we do know that there are these attacks that will recover the factorization, and you will be able to detect that this subversion has happened and that public exponent that you've been given is malicious in some sense.
Thank you, speaker again. The last talk of this session, which is parameter hiding order reviewing encryptions without parents. So this is the joint work with Tong and Iwan, Bergel, Xing. So Tong is going to give the presentation.
Okay, thanks. Okay, hello everyone. I will present our works. So my work is the parent hiding for the reveal encryption without parents, and this work is joined with the Martin Yuan and the Biao and Xing Huang. Okay, so our work setting is the range queries on encrypted database. In this setting, the data owner will encrypt some messaging and output source the safe text to the storages. And the state also we import it as encrypted database. But in this database, we cannot search anything because the safe text cannot enable this some compare operation on it. So a special case for encryption is for the order reveal encryption. It aims to reveal some information about the order of the safe text. So if we can construct a safe text, and it will enable comparison algorithm to find the quality of two messages, such as the message MI is equal or not or less than MG. So, but for the scheme OIE, we have some leakages. The first level leakage is called level 0 leakage. It's an ideal leakage. In this leakage, we only need to reveal the order of the message. And another leakage is called level 2 leakage. It has proposed at 2018. And in this leakage, we can see that the order is revealed, and the most significant different bit is also revealed. So if we at this level, we also will leave some bit information about the message. We aim to attach the level 1 small the ICLWH. In this case, we don't leave the position of the MSB, but we will leave some position or some the equities of the string messages MSDB. So we give a picture to describe this leakage. So we considered 4-bit plaintext space. In this space, we also consider a set such as the 0, 4, 5, 10, 11, the set. When we start in this picture, we also can do that the FTP of the 0 and 4 is equal to 2. So it means that the stickiness of 0 and 4 is revealed the second bit. And we know that the second bit is 0 for 1 for 0 and is the 1 for 4. Also, we imagine that another in this data, we also figure that it has the C leakage from the subscription. So we constructed the leakage from the formulated to the subscription. Also, we observed that we have many the same subscription for different seed, but we have other problems that the sequence of the message and of the form it has the form of the 0, 1 and non-0, and it will revealed by this subscription. So we construct our impression to another leakage. In this leakage, we may see that the narrow leakage is reveal the sequence of the sequence. But in the left structure, we may see that two different lenses at different substructure. Okay, we knew that this two set of the sequence we have different information revealed and we can distinguish these two set sequence with others. But in the level one levels, we see that this information is not different and is distinguished with the others. So in this indicator, we cannot know the position of the missing position. We cannot message the but we can know why the here is equal to here. So we can just reduce this instruction to the very level. Yeah. So we may see that level one because it is knowing information in level two. So we'll review some OI privileges. So for two messages, we use the bitwise equation to decompose the some message. It will be important message to from M to MI to N. And also we see that in the origin it will reveal the STP for M dash. And the green lowest is the SIM. They have the SIM equal or, but for the right word, we don't know whether they are equal or unequal. And we use the SSP and we use the SSP and QRP, STMI and to the UI. Also, the equivalence of is a cable. And then we change the modem to from straight to the M. If the module is very large, and we may see that this one. But this construction also will reveal this information. So we have a second technology is that to use the random information. Equally, randomize the sequence of this UI sequence. Okay, we can also use that information. In this blocks, we also have the I sub 1 equal blocks and then sub I plus 1 and equal blocks. It also will reveal the information MSDP. So we need a new primitive. The new primitive will here use the hash functions, not the traditional hash functions. In the hash function, we can see that this hash function and this function is not equal because the U2 is not equal to UI-X. But if we find that UI is equal to UJ-X, we'll have we will specify the predicate of the hash function. So we can test whether X is equal to Y start or plus 1. So it's a property processing property. And randomness is also relative and conclusion reason is relative. So at 2018 PKC proposed a new PKC construction. In this construction, it will use the binary pairings to translate it. And this construction is also like some relation comparison or equivalence comparison. We will see that the randomness element of this one is and the randomness element in this one. And in this we will include the nicety at 2G dash, and for this one, we will set a randomness here, and if we are to do here. This one put here, and by the property, also can provide the UI is the equal to UG dash plus 1. So in this model, it will have some information leakage. Usually, we are being the level 1 leakage, and also for complexity, it will need a squared binary operations for check whether M is less than and less, and also S squared for check whether M is less than less. So we also have used some small optimization. The first way of optimization is that we reduce the number of the element in the CPS. We use only one element to instead of an element in this. One is also we also test the diagram equation security, and also it's the same comparison equivalence. After that, we synchronous convergence is that it's possible to design permanent hiding order reveal scheme without parents. So we construction and PKC construction to form a special type of identification and provide a generate OIE construction from this PPH construction. Also, by our result, we reduce the CPS more than 51%, and the comparison equation nearly by 2.6 times, and the comparison more than 3 times. So our construction is based on the snow identification. We'll review some properties of the snow identification. For the basic properties, it will be completist, soundness, and spatial honest by geology. For another 4 attractive properties, we create the commitment independence and the commitment recoverability and argumentability response it is indiscriminability. So for the first property, we see that the commitment of the snow identification is the independent of the security and the targeting and the so we see that this is the commitment of the snow identification and the will depend on the randomness R0 and the independence of the ST and the targeting. And also we will see that if we have the same commitment, G power R0 and G power R0 dash, they will have the result dash. R0 is equal to R0 dash. So this is the first property. And for the second, we will see that the commitment can be recovered by the property by the verifier. So traditionally in the verifier process, we will recover the commitment by some equivalence. For some identification, we may say that G power RTL will be recovered by verifier, and it will to compare it. G power RTL is whether it will equal to the commitment depth. So this is the second property. And the third one is we can add some randomness on the commitment. And if we will equal to the randomness is required is in the time before the commitment. Also we see that G power R0 is equal to G power R0 and R1 by the randomness plus. Okay. The first is that we see that the response is increasing from the space. Also in short distance, the response is the 0 in the in the city also. So we find the main observation is that map invariance. In this operation, we found that the picture we see that is the traditional snow identification and verification. But if we add a randomness on the parent and the PK, it will become a new RPR and RPK. But if we use the RPR to the randomized, it will put a new commitment CMT. But CMT dash is a dependence from the CMT, the original commitment with the new randomness R&D dash. So it has some property things like the binary queries. Even we had run this on the PAR and the PG to run this RPR and PG, and we add a new another is on the response, so we can combine two running together. Next on the actual running is binary queries. So we change the PPH from PPH from the snow identifications. The left image is the cache is parent-based PPH, but we construct our PPH as this. In this way, this four element is just a smart identification trace, and also this one is the second. And if we want to use some binary queries with change the binary query is an operation. Just the A, C, D, the four inputs, and we are comparing A part, B, and C part, D, and mark them together. So in this way, also use the HC to return. This one we can place element like this. Like this, like this, though we can get the recording is the representation of that. So usually, so we found that the result is these two elements. The first part of this environment is that R0 and R1 dash is equal. So these two results is equal when we see that UI and UI objects is either type. UJ dash plus 1 is equal. Also, this equation is also the this one. So we can do one times pointer multiplication to check whether UI is UJ dash plus 1 and sub 1. So by this method, we can reduce the binary pairs to pointer multiplication. Also, we can structure the PPH from generate constraint or also the small identification. And the second order is the two from PPH to parameter overriding. The messaging and is the encryption way by the device the encryption. Okay, so we are provide with this. And we use the PPH to encryption and each PPH has functions for enrolls we can construct with the body surpass product. We can see that this surpass is very large and some elements in it. So we do some optimization. We first to change the to reduce the element of challenge. The challenge will from the n travels to one travels even because they based on the small paradigms and implication. And we have to check the order reveal order of the two safe tests. We also need we need about 8 n squared Google exploration operations, but it's also very expensive for compute. Okay. Okay. The second order is that we are improve our efficiency with the level 1 that's the negative. Level 1 that's it is that little change with the level 1 negative. We have the difference between here. We also can see the units of string message DB, but it will never the full message is not DB is whether we repair. But in this model, we have a chance to fix the primitive in type in MST to replace randomized application in class. Also, we can do conversion from the point Y conversion. The first row is like the first row certainly to the certain angle S1 to the S1. So in this model, we have the auto do some most weighted and group of equalization operations on the comparison. So the comparison is the reduced by pattern. Okay, for exponential evolution, we have tested in our coding, and we may see that for ICT with 64. And for comparison, we are prepared 150 milliseconds, and we can see that for defined and related cases, we progress defined federal constructions. And for federal water, we have seen that we think the way can to some new construction because we have designed some slightly different treatment with macro environments isogeny based protocols and lattice based protocols. And also we can extend this work to multi-user environment. So that is our federal work. Okay. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
So any questions from the audience? Yeah, I have a small question. So you can remove the parents because you use the random order.
No. I removed the parameters the way I used the special construction based on the sigma potatoes.
But you hash, when you prove the security, you need to use the random.
Oh, for security, I use the ransomware.
Yeah. So let's thanks all the speakers in this session again. So